Greetings and welcome to In-Depth. I'm Dike Rostant. Women globally lost $800 billion in income due to COVID-19. Our guest created a platform to share stories of women who inspired her to embrace the opportunities and changes that life brings. Originally from TNT, though currently based in Spain, Existential and Trauma Therapist, a social anthropologist, among other things, she has just launched a new book titled A Lioness Heart, Find Your Purpose, Find Your Path. Her name is Genevieve Pantin, and she joins us now to share on her journey. Thank you for making the time, Genevieve, especially when you're here being home with family and friends. But I want to ask you though, because one of the first things on your website, which we'll speak to as well, it says as modern day women, we sometimes forget who we are and where we came from. We get so lost and engrossed in our daily lives that we lose track of what's really important to us. And I want to ask, was it a single event or a series of events that kind of helped you refocus on what's important?
Well, thank you very much for having me today, DK. It's an absolute pleasure. What I said was a single event. I think it was a collection of moments. I had a lot of women at a certain point of time before COVID, so to speak. If we use COVID as a pillar, and I was hearing about their challenges as women, as challenges as women in the world, where they're trying to maintain this perfect picture. And working with quite a number of women, I felt, you know what? I'm actually sharing in these challenges as well. And as I started to do a lot of work on myself, I figured that I had something to share and something to say. And with my background as a therapist and also a cultural anthropologist, and thinking of not just what impact behavior is, but also the impact that your society or the community or your culture has on your behavior also. And I felt I had a voice. And I wanted to share that voice, and that's what I put between the pages of the book. That voice that I felt I had in that moment in time, and it crossed over into COVID as well whilst I was writing, and I actually rewrote bits of the book in the first 3 months of COVID, and I felt that made it a lot more relevant as well. And so that's a little snapshot of. It's a gift, actually. I think of it as a gift, my gift of my voice in that space and time.
Do you also consider it a gift to yourself? And I say that because sometimes there's so many things that are in our head and they kind of bang to get out. Sometimes we try to compartmentalize. Sometimes we find different ways to articulate it. Or was it a gift to yourself as well?
The journey of writing is without a doubt a very self-indulgent gift. So it was a gift for me to find the space to express myself, to say, and the stories in the book of people who've touched people who've touched my life, as well as women I've had in therapy who have really brought lessons and messages that I felt was really important to share. So the honest truth to your question, DK, yes, it was quite a gift to myself as well. It was a gift to indulge myself for a year to share my voice. The gift, actually, I think every woman should take for themselves. We all have a book within us, and we can all be the author of our stories. And I encourage any and every woman to, even if it's not for publishing's sake, journal, write, share your story, find your voice within the pages of a book or on the screen of your computer. So I really urge all women, find your voice and share it.
But speak to the woman who is saying that I don't know enough, I haven't lived enough. Who's interested in hearing my voice? Sometimes the people that I want to listen to me don't necessarily listen to me. What do you tell that person?
Well, it's very interesting, DK, you'd say that, because I think that was the very catapult for me to share my voice. When, even though I was working quite effectively as a therapist and working with people with trauma, I still felt that in my little world, I wasn't heard enough. And I was starting to become a shell of myself. I started to feel like I was not living my life. I was living the life with titles as a mum, as a therapist, as a wife. as a stepmother, as a, I can talk about all the things I was doing, but I was losing in that process the person I was being, I was wanting to be. And for that woman who feels that they don't have a story, dig a little deeper. You've got to start that work. You definitely have a story. And it may not have to be one that you share, but if it's one that you can connect with, you can connect with the next or the future chapters of your life.
And it makes me also even kind of want to say, physician, heal thyself. Because,
Yes,
and I'm thinking that for someone who is so involved in service, so helping people who are looking for that safe space, that oasis within their day, where do you find that, especially when this is something that you do so consistently on a basis? And the way you spoke about using COVID as a marker, sometimes it feels as though the way time can be split into BC and AD. Sometimes people talk about before COVID and after.
Pre-COVID, post-COVID, yes. Yes, so I feel that in that, doing the work on yourself and really searching internally and finding your grounding and using, and the book I share a lot of tools as well, grounding tools that you can use to come back to who you are, things like stupid things like dance in front of the mirror, laugh at your own jokes, nourish yourself internally by really thinking of, food as therapy. Food is a very, very big part of our lives. And, and I talk about in the book about seeing food as that relationship in life that you cannot end. It's a relationship that you need to create a healthy and a sustainable, nurturing one. Yes, so that pre and post COVID, I really feel had a big impact in the way we saw things like food. I mean, we all became the baker and the cook and the nurturer during COVID, where there was very little else to do. And if you're on social media, seeing all the videos and the Instagram pictures and so on of food. So it's thinking about how do you carry on that work for yourself by nurturing yourself internally and externally.
I think that's important. And even like you just kind of spoke to it in a deprecatory manner, speaking about dancing in front of a mirror, but sometimes that can be such an act of love. Yes. Because sometimes we're our harshest critics and you're in front of this mirror looking at everything that your people may be trying to pull down, you may be having a hand in that as well, but lifting yourself up and allowing yourself to be. And I think it's so important. But it also it kind of leads to ask, what's in a name? How did you decide this is the name of this thing I'm going to be using to articulate my voice?
Do you mean by that the title of the book?
Yes.
I think, well, for me, the journey was such a spiritual one. And I would start days when you have the writer's block, and when you work sometimes backward, forward, backward, you go a chapter, you shift them around. But I remember just sitting one afternoon, and we were living in Dubai at the time that the book was written. So we lived in Dubai for 13 years and moved back to Spain in the last 3 years. And I was sitting at that Arabic sunset, and I'd sit outside and you hear the birds, whistling, and it's like Trinidad where the sunset is very quick. And I closed my eyes and I remembered a moment that I had in the Serengeti and watching a lioness walk across a plain with her pride behind her. And I felt this is every woman. This woman, at that moment, I had such a connection with this lioness that it was, to me, like time stood still. And she would do anything she had to do to protect her pride. She'd do anything that she had to do. Her history would have been a difficult one. You could imagine how many fights she had, how she had to care for these other beings to bring them to survival. And I had such a strong connection that when I was searching for titles for the book, it was actually almost the first and only. So again, I think the lioness helped me row. And that's what I felt I was doing in the book. I was having a big old loud roar.
And we let you roar at this point in time. We let that breathe a little bit. We are speaking with Genevieve Pantin, looking at how we can find paths with a Lioness Heart. Launching a new book, Lioness Heart, Find Your Purpose, Find Your Path. We return after this. Welcome back. We are speaking with Genevieve Pantin, and there is a song by Louise Bennett Coverley, Miss Lou, and she speaks of true me love have lion heart, true me love have lion heart, strong and everlasting only for you. We're not reaching there at this point in time, but the name of her new book, A Lioness Heart, Find Your Purpose, Find Your Path. What has the journey been like, finding the strength, finding your path, and kind of intermingling it with the stories, anecdotes, the experiences of others who have helped you along those incremental points of your journey?
Well, as I was saying before, there was a point in time where I felt I was shrinking and becoming a shell of myself, and I had to find a way to roar. I had to find a way to go back to the Genevieve that I knew. I had to find my purpose again. And even though from an outside it looked like I was living with purpose as a trauma therapist, I was stagnating. And I knew at the time as well that I was not the only woman who was feeling like that. And going back to that, back to the basics of the journey of thinking, what are my dreams? What are my aspirations? Where do I find my voice? How do I find my warrior spirit? Because my warrior spirit is what's going to get me to the next chapter, what's going to get me winning in the next chapter. And as I started to write and I started to search the stories of, and really do that real emotional upheaval using a lot of very interesting, like thoughts like, the tide is turning, which is one of the chapters. And when you think that that change can come at any point, if the only thing that's constant about life is change, and thinking of how do we approach, the waves of the tide that's turning, and so the book, it's probably very florally written as well. It's a very easy read, by the way. And as I searched through those themes that I felt were quite poignant in my time of life and had been quite poignant in the last sort of 15 years of my life, and I started to search in my head, who were the people who inspired me through those moments? Who were the people who, whether it was someone in therapy, whether it was, I talk of an experience of a young boy who actually came into my life when I was living in London working with horses, and he turned up one day and he silently stood with me week after week after week, just with his silent energy. And then later I learned that he was a young boy who had survived the Rwandan genocide and walked for miles and miles to the border and was picked up by the services and brought to London. He was working, he'd watched his entire family massacred in front of him, and he was living with a foster family. And he just found his way to the stables that I was at every weekend, which to him was like the end of the world, which is what he did when he walked to the UN services. And he would spend every weekend with me, just silently with his little energy. I taught him to ride, but what he was teaching me was so much bigger. I felt his power, I felt his strength. I actually had the fortune to watch him roar as well as he maneuvered his different challenges in life. And then he inspired me to go on and to work in Kenya, and he inspired me to go on to work with, I worked with ex-child soldiers, I worked with kids with HIV, and he inspired that massive chapter of my life. And coming back to the book, I had to remind myself of the warrior I was, that I'd shelved for a little while whilst I focused on being a mother and a wife and having a job. And I just had to remind myself, you know what, you've got that warrior spirit, you've got to reconnect with it. And I knew that I had a voice to share.
And we have about 3 minutes more, but that example leads to the question, how did you approach the book in terms of the themes, because being a mother, being a wife, being involved in therapy, how do you decide, yes, this is going in the book? And not necessarily saying no to some of the other experiences, but saying, okay, well, not yet.
There were probably 5 books I could have written if you left me to it. But I had to condense it to think of what were the most meaningful lessons I'd learned. And I was very fortunate. Just before I wrote the book, I came into this incredible community of women. And I joined a foundation called the Global Gift Foundation. It's founded by Eva Longoria and Maria Bravo, very, very, very special human beings. So becoming part of that community as well, it gave me a bit of introspection and also a bit of a chance to see, you know, how they have inspired other people. And I looked at them and I saw the warriors in them. And I thought, how do other women connect with this warrior spirit to live with purpose like these women are doing? And then I thought, you know, and how do you find your voice, which is another big part. Sing Your Song is one of the chapters of the book. And I think, you know, look at them. They're speaking with purpose and speaking with meaning. How do I find that voice to be able to do that as well? And then I had your spirit guide and speaking with Maria and Eva, actually learning about how amazing things happened on their journey along the way. And so I think being taken in by this incredible community of women helped me to, and my greatest gift, to be honest, Dike, is I'm a great observer. I love to observe. And I was fortunate enough to have this community of women that I was able to join at this point in time where, you know, I was sparking and I thought I'm observing, I'm seeing, I'm feeling, and I'm finding my voice in the process.
And in terms of that observation, we have 2 minutes more and I have 2 questions, so it's a minute each, I guess. But who does this book target specifically and how can they access it?
Okay.
As the first one.
So it was my gift to women. However, I have since had some husbands of friends of mine or husbands of people that have reached out to me and said, this has been really inspiring. I suppose there's only 2 of us sexes around, really, the male and the female. And we each, if we're not trying to understand ourselves, we're trying to understand the other. So whilst the aim and the target was initially for women, I would say it can benefit anyone. I would say there's some stories in there that can touch anyone. So.
And how do people get onto it? So
the book has had a good run so far, and we're in a lot of the bookshops around the world, like Barnes & Noble, we're in Walmart, we're in W.H. Smith. But the easiest access point is Amazon, I would say. And it's available, I think, on most of the online platforms. And if anybody has a copy whilst they're in Trinidad, send me a message on Instagram. I'm very happy to sign for you as well. And so online, it's available on all the online platforms.
And the last question, we're trying to squeeze in the voice that you are using now, the voice that you have articulated, the raw that you have encapsulated in this book. What would you tell the young lady who is in the traditional education system in Trinidad and Tobago, growing up wanting to do so much?
Wow, that's a big one. Take the risk. Take the risk. Take a deep breath. Breathe in and jump. That's what I'd say.
And definitely something to dive into. Thank you so much for the time that you spent with us here and the time that you took in terms of just writing down these thoughts and experiences to share with the world, as it were. Genevieve Pantin, author of A Lioness Heart, Find Your Purpose, Find Your Path. Thank you so much on behalf of the entire TTT News team. This has been In Depth with me, Dike Rostant. Thank you so much for joining us.